Have you ever had to make a decision and you were absolutely terrified because you didn't want to make the wrong decision because you don't want to be perceived a certain way and you just don't know how to make the decision? Well, so that's what we're going to be talking about today on Boldly Different Conversations with Bree. So welcome to my new car where I'll be doing Boldly Different Conversations with Bree. I bought a new car to me, and the whole process was terrifying. It's the first time that I've ever bought a car for myself, specifically with getting a loan. So, yeah, it was an exciting, but a little bit scary experience because it was new. Originally I was going for a different kind of car, and I ended up having to kind of change my mind a little bit on some things. But I had to go through the process for me, the process that I had to go through, in order to get to that decision. And what I really noticed during that time, I had a lot of fear that I was going to make the wrong decision, fear of how I was going to be perceived for making the decision that I made. I was afraid of disappointing people, did the whole people pleaser approval thing. And I was so aware of it. And I was getting mad at myself for feeling that way and like making a decision based on what someone else might think. I mean, and granted, some of these people were people that I love and value their opinion and value, their approval, because of who they are in my life, not just because I want approval to feel love. But I saw myself in this pattern, and it made the process so much more difficult for me. I made it difficult for myself. But I had to go through that process. I had to do it that way so that I could learn from it, so that I could find the freedom in the decision that I finally ended up making. And so I want to talk today about what that process kind of looked like, and how you might be able to use it to be able to make decisions in your own life. So the first thing is I freaked out a little bit. And you know what? You might do that too, because that's what happens sometimes. And I just had to give myself compassion in that. And I think it's really important for us when we have those little mini freakouts and we feel overwhelmed and we just don't know what the next decision is. And we're so worried about perception and all the things, because it's going to happen because we're recovering people pleasers. We want other people's approval, and it's really important to us. And so when we have those little mini freakouts and we forget who we are and we forget our own worth and that our decisions and our opinions and our desires matter, and we have those moments, we have to be compassionate with ourselves. Absolutely. The second thing we have to do, and then I did, is I reached out. I reached out to my trusted people. I reached out specifically for me. I reached out to my best friend because I knew she would shoot straight with me, and she would ask me the hard questions. She would challenge some things that I was saying or thinking or feeling in a way that would be profitable for me. And I also talked to someone who, because this had to do with money for me, and I have some money trauma that I am working through, I also talked to someone who was really good with money, budgeting, someone who would have a lot of insight, someone whose wisdom I could trust when it came to finances, money, spending, getting loans, all of that kind of stuff. Someone who I could trust, who I knew was going to shoot straight with me and support me and encourage me in the path that, makes the most sense financially for me, to kind of clear things out and give me clarity. The third thing that I did is I had to adjust. Now, I'm an Enneagram 3 Wing 2. We've talked about this, very goal oriented. And my goal was to buy a certain kind of car, in a certain way. And it did not include a loan. And so when I had to adjust my goal, and not my long-term goal, that the kind of car that I want is still one of those long-term goals, dream kind of things. It just wasn't the time for it now. And so I had to adjust myself to understand that what I needed to do was to have a goal that was going to be a bridge to that ultimate goal. So little baby steps. And I had to kind of pull myself back and make a more realistic goal for myself. And part of my goals is to increase my credit score. That financial trauma stuff there. So a big step for me was taking on a loan in my name for the first time in my life, so that I could have some credit on my credit so that I could show that I could make payments on time, et cetera, et cetera. And that was just such a huge thing for me. It was, just whenever you have some kind of like a financial trauma situation, anything that has to do with money and loans and all that kind of stuff is just hard in and of itself. So your thing might be completely different, but that's what my thing was. So I had to adjust my goals. And I also, again, had to be compassionate with myself and go at my own pace. Part of me really just wanted to get it done. So I felt myself rushing through. But then this other part of me felt my feet dragging because of fear. And I didn't want to make the decision. What ultimately helped me make the decision was listening to my intuition. So one of the things I had said is that I was going to have a certain brand of car, certain model, and it was the model that I wasn't going to be able to get because it just was a little far out of my reach financially. But I knew that I was supposed to get that kind of car, like that brand of car. And I also knew the color, it was between two colors. I just had, whenever I would visualize myself, that visualization tool, we've talked about that before, in creating your life, I would envision myself in either a silver or a white vehicle. And so when I was looking at vehicles, I wasn't necessarily looking for silver and white. I was keeping myself open, but the ones that I felt myself attracted to happened to be oftentimes where I was like, oh yeah, I really do want to look at that one. Happened to be either silver or white. Now, in my case, I was kind of in this place where because of my credit situation, there were only certain vehicles that I could buy from the dealership because of the mileage, because I bought a used vehicle. So mileage and year, and they do that balance of where your credit worthiness. So even though I felt like I did have a choice, I also didn't have a choice. My choice was much smaller based on credit and all of that kind of stuff. So I had to let go of total control, to control the things that were controllable for me. So when they presented me with vehicles that would fit my profile, my credit profile that I could buy, I was really just kind of laughed because there were 3 different vehicles and one of them was the brand that I was looking originally. And I wouldn't have necessarily chosen that car. And it was the only one that was white. And so I test drove them and I didn't like the feel of the other. I didn't like my position of where I was sitting. There were a couple of little things that just were cosmetic-y things I didn't like about it. And one just, I didn't like the history of the vehicle. So the one that I ended up getting happened to be white and the brand that I knew I was supposed to get. And that's kind of also helped me make my decision because in my tuition, as I had been visualizing before, that those things aligned. It just aligned. And it just felt right. It felt right. And I didn't feel resistance. The only resistance I felt was because of the whole situation to begin with, of getting a loan and doing the thing that was really, really scary for me, because of the kind of thing I was doing. So, utilizing my intuition, utilizing the past, visualization that I had done, and using all of that information all together, and then just really feeling into it. And again, checking with wise mind of, is this the right thing for me? Not just, feeling it, but, using my brain, using my heart, and then embodying, doing the thing. So, checked in with my wise people financially, checked in with the best friend, and ultimately made the decision for myself, not based on what they said or their approval, but I did utilize the information that they gave me. And they brought up great points about, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And ultimately my decision, I asked myself my 5-layer of why questions of like, one, why was I afraid of doing this to begin with? And why this vehicle, why at this time, why the loan, and I did the 5-layer of why with each of those areas where I was feeling fear or where I was feeling resistance, and where I felt maybe like a little overwhelmed. And it really, really helped me to be able to clarify in my mind what my next step was going to be. Now, here's the thing. I made the decision, but I was still afraid. Like, I'm literally sitting there looking at the paperwork, going over paperwork, pen in my hand, and my hand was shaking. But we still do things afraid. We have to push through that resistance. We have to identify, what is the resistance? What is it I'm resisting in this thing that is making me feel afraid, that is making me feel like I uncertain, or I don't want to take that step forward. And then once we identify it, then we can say, is this like a real fear thing? Something I really do need to be worried about, that I need to think about, that I need to be resistant to? Or is this just resistance there that I need to kind of push through in order to get to the other side? And I knew that I needed to push through it to get to the other side. And I did it. And for me, I needed to do it on my own. That was like a big thing for me. I really need to do it on my own, and then celebrate it afterwards, through phone calls and videos and connecting the phone to the car and the car calling people. It was just so much fun because my car that I had before was 20 plus years old. And these things are all like standard now, where I'm like, oh my gosh, it doesn't have a cassette player. What? Like, it's fun. So, I think my challenge question to you then today is, what is it you might have some fear about? What is it you're afraid of it? Are you afraid of the perception? Are you afraid of not getting the approval? Are you afraid of making the bad decision? Are you afraid? What is it you're afraid of? What is it you're resistant to? And are you able to identify that resistance as something you need to push through, or is it a warning bell? Because there's two different things there. And do you have a process to help you push through that resistance? Are you giving yourself compassion? Are you willing to adjust? Are you going to your wise people and reaching out to get help where you need help? And then are you willing to push through the resistance so you can bridge over to what it is you really want for your future self by forward motion? Oh, my light just went out of my car. I guess that means this video is over. Have a great rest of your day.